My name is Karen Nelson. I'm a co-director of the Center for Literary and Comparative Studies in the Department of English at the University of Maryland. I'm really just here to moderate our session, and I want to note that we are recording this session because we know there will be demand for people that can't be here right now. So I'm going to actually turn over the proceedings to Will because honestly, because he writes under a pen name, I'm not even sure how he wants to be introduced for the record. So I'm going to let him do that for himself. And so take it away, Will.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Thank you very much. You all are seeing Karen here on the screen now, but she's been helping me out prep for this stuff, and she's really a great help, and I'm so pleased that she's helped me out. Thank you, Karen. I'm Will Pittman. I teach at the University of Maryland. I've been there for about 14 years. I teach English 101 for the most part. Helping students organize their thinking. And in a lot of ways, the poetry that I do is an element of that. Just trying to teach and entertain people. And so it's kind of nice that the university is helping me launch this wonderful book. I'm also here with Grace Cavalieri, and I'm very pleased to introduce her. She's interviewing me today, but I just want to say these things about her. First off, she is living, breathing literary hero, and she's a mentor to many, many. She lives poetry. She sees everything as poetry. She understands everybody's poetry, and I'm just so grateful that she's been a part of this as well. And I will now turn things over to Grace. Thank you.
Will Pittman, thank you. It's a pleasure to welcome a new book in the world, and I love to talk to a new author. So, just to get started, let everyone hear your voice and read us the first few lines of Limbo.
Righto. I'm going to do 5 lines.
Okay.
I knew I was being held as I fell, as if the fire resisted my progress. I believed I was in the belly of hell, being burned in order to manifest the scars of 1/3 of understanding self. There you go.
Wow, we know we're in the belly of hell right away.
Actually,
So,
kind of moving out of it.
what actually will we experience in Limbo?
Limbo will be D. Selby Fing traveling through New Bedford City, represented in the years 1827 to 1900. And Fing will be actually going upward and to the right pretty much with every step. And this is a change from downward and to the left in Perdition. And that's also kind of related to Dante's traveling through Purgatorio. So Fing will then meet a number of people. Abraham Lincoln is one of his guides. They meet a Down syndrome character named Jack, who also travels with them and ends up being a kind of a deliverer for Fing. In the first half of the poem, they meet Stephen Douglas, Millard Fillmore, Ulysses Grant, Andrew Jackson, and all of these episodes kind of help to move the thing along.
Only only Will Pittman could do this. This is the second part of the trilogy.
Yes.
And so this has taken 25 years of your life. So
Yeah.
why did you do this? I mean, what are you doing? Why did you take Dante's comedy, which is about morality and love and redemption, and turn it upside down into immorality, sometimes shocking, lots of times funny, ironic? What's up? What are you doing?
Yeah, thank you, Grace. I think I mean, in some ways, very much influenced by Michel Foucault, who is examining the structures of power and basically inverts our understanding where, most people are trained to believe in society that power is above you and holds you in one place and tells you no and doesn't allow you to do things. Whereas Foucault says each individual has a great amount of power. And so, that to me is one of the key perspectives. The ironic perspective is just along the lines of trying not to do what Dante did, which was, as you said, morality with love, and really just focusing on irony with love. What is morality? That's the way things should be. And what is irony? It's the way things are.
This
So
is a work, it is a masterwork, Will. It is,
thank you. I
and
appreciate
we
your
will
saying
hear
so.
just hear some of it. Let's just hear some of Limbo.
Okay, let's keep going in the fall at the beginning. So being burned in order to manifest the scars of 1/3 of understanding self, if you have come thus far in a legitimate fashion, when implosion and the gravity of motion through atmospheres of fire brought me down to the ground without levity, like an object drawn into crashing by force, like a wave seeks the shore inevitably, I came howling in with a shriek and a fierce impact which shattered my eggshell but left me little traumatized. I was gasping for breath, as if what had been taken from me was bereft me. It was like the finality of a single death, where the rest of the world kept itself progressing. But it was clearly the beginning of a new path. And as I stood up, the fire was above me, arrayed in the colors of dawn, and my guide returned beside me, offering a love he'd not previously shown. He seemed relieved. He smiled widely and reached to hug me. I appreciated that he seemed less aggrieved, but I was still trying to make sense. My mind was swollen with images, a river flowing with oceans of sentience, with no means to contain it all in structure like words or language.
You know, Will, this is truly literate. It is beautifully lyrical. There are metaphors, there are similes. This is a true poetic piece of work. Force, fierce, me, death, path, me, he, relieved, aggrieved. Sense, why did you choose tercets? What
Right.
does three mean to you in compressing? You know, art is just the way we hold our thoughts. How did your thought come in these elements of three?
Yeah, I think the word compression probably is the most important one. I mean, poetry, the idea is to get the most power out of the fewest words. And so you are trying to compress your imagery and just make things carry more weight than it appears. So the structure of a tercet is pretty compact. And so, you know, to be fully candid, I didn't entirely stick with, you know, iambic pentameter. There's a lot of variation in there. English doesn't really lend itself to the kind of rhyming that tercets require.
Well, it is. I am really impressed with this. It is clean. Someone's in control of this. When we read this, we know there's not a lump under the mattress. We know someone is in charge, and that is truly the most important thing I always look for. I'm sort of interested in knowing when you began all this. When did you even begin the profane comedy?
Right. I was studying the Divine Comedy, Dante's Divine Comedy, with Tony Wolk at Portland State University. And he suggested that rather than write an analytical paper about it, I could just kind of create my own response to the poem. And so I decided, well, I'll write Dante's poem like, you know, an American. And so this is 1999. And I started it while I was a student, but it took me a year. And so I finished with grad school before I finally finished the poem. And then because nobody wants to read epic poetry, I decided that I was going to continually return to the imagery and try to create new formulations of imagery so that other people could approach the poem in different ways. So one thing I did was I wrote 225 pages of annotations for the poem so that somebody who was reading the poem could at least get a sense of what the compressed language really meant.
Whoa.
But I fictionalized that and I created several characters. And so it's a story in and of itself. And then after that, I wrote a book of short stories about D. Selby Fing, who's the author of this poem and who killed himself after he finished writing it. And then I
What else could he possibly do? I mean, there is
what
nowhere
else could
to
I
go.
do? It's 25 years later. I'm still kind of working on it.
Well, did you have Dante by your side the whole time? Did you reread Dante and then put it aside? Or did you actually use it as a resource guide?
You know, at the time that I was writing it, I was very fresh with the study of Dante, and I was also reading a lot of other epic poetry that Dante was familiar with. Virgil's Aeneid,
Oh,
for example.
wonderful.
Yeah, so all of that was very close to me. But by the same token, the content is really American history, so I'm not really looking to Dante to formulate who my characters are or anything like that.
But there is a foundation here. We
Absolutely.
believe, when you talk about Virgil, we believe that there is some sort of knowledge that is under this, a hydraulic of
Mm,
information. It comes to us as if it is not loose. It is really based on something. And I'm so
yeah.
happy to hear the beginnings of it. But did you think it was going to be a three-part novel when you began?
Yeah, I did. I pretty much aimed for 100 pages, 33 pages per, with a variation here or there. I pretty much had that notion, and that's Dante's architecture, right?
It is.
And Virgil as well. He's going down into the underworld, and so that structure was there, and it was just for me to kind of fill it in with the warped workings of my mind.
I love authors. I love to hear that somebody will spend 25 years on a terse set. This is what is making civilization. This is why we're not just three-dimensional people slopping around in the mud. Well, let us hear a bit more.
Okay, so
Take
this
us and set it up for us.
right. So this scene is the exact middle, not just of the book, but of the whole three poems. Abraham Lincoln is Fing's guide through hell, and in the first half of Limbo. But now we're going into the assassination scene, and so Fing is with Jack and Lincoln as they walk into Ford's Theater in New Bedford. There is no Ford's Theater in New Bedford, but this is poetic license, literally poetic license. Here we go. So Fing asked, "Where are we going?" "It's Ford's Theater right here on Union Street." We turned into a gaslit lobby, dressed in evening clothes, and the crowd were not unanimous in their high regard for my guide. I noted hostility in the eyes above the beards in the milling crowd. Jack shuffled behind me, groaning rhythmically, wary, anxious, scared. He held my hand as a path opened up for us to ascend the stairs to the balcony. My captain remained composed, unsmiling, and aloof from the buzz he generated. His head disappeared first into the darkness, into a scene I well knew. Jack began weeping openly, but it was as if no other person could see him sob or the tears sweeping down his cheeks. I called out, "Please," cringing in mad terror, yet we kept moving up each step inexorably. I repeat, against my will, we joined our guide in the booth. It was an Aleph moment for me. I saw all that has been and is to be, and both had me twitching in impending panic. I saw Jesus and Nietzsche together, resting as a lion would with a lamb.
That is a cliffhanger. So just to review this, the time and the locale is where?
We are in New Bedford, Massachusetts. It's
And the
the
year.
timing is pretty vague. It's between 1827 and 1900. But literally, in terms of the poem, there's 3,614 lines, and this middle section is, like 1800, line 1800 to line 1900. So it's right square in the middle of the poem.
And so Lincoln is the guide for Ying, and we'll meet Stephen Douglas and Ulysses Grant, Andrew
Yep.
Jackson.
Yep.
Are you an expert in history?
I maybe like to think so. I don't have great training, but just endless curiosity. Like I really don't know where it comes from, but I just want to know, what was that life really like. I don't want the mythology. I don't want the legend, and so I will read a lot of history, a lot of biography, just to try to imagine that kind of stuff for myself.
How I wish I knew you when you were 5 years old.
I was
Just
great.
imagine what you were doing. Well, let's hear some more.
Okay, so I mentioned in the last little bit that Fing is having an Aleph moment. So the Aleph moment in kind of classical literature is that the character sees everything, past, present, future, everything. And to see everything is, like divine, but it's also hard to process. And so that's where we are as I begin this. And then we'll go into the assassination scene itself.
Yeah, I'm curious about why you stopped your tercets and went into a long prose poem,
Yeah,
which went from margin to margin. The
right.
extended line is very important to me. And
Yeah,
I wonder, it means a lot to me.
it's this right here. And the idea is that the structure is destroyed. There is no more path anymore. There's nothing. I mean, Fing is not even in Ford's Theater anymore. He's seeing eternity, going forward and going backwards. And so it's basically the complete and total devastation of Fing as an individual human being.
Right. And circling up to this place, how do you create tension and suspense in
Yeah.
poetry?
Well, I mean, I think basically absurdity does a lot for suspense, because once you realize that your author is going to pull the rug out from under you, then you have no idea what's going to come next. So as soon as you start, so early in the poem, Stephen Douglas lifts up a sack of fish eggs, and they transform themselves into Millard Fillmore. So, I mean, that's bizarre. And so, I mean, it might
It
be
has a
just
great
bizarre.
tradition. It has a great tradition in literature.
Yeah,
The
Ovid, for
Perdition,
example, right?
of course.
Yeah.
How valuable did you find that dialogue is in creating immediacy so that we feel we're right there with them?
Well, dialogue is really what reveals the characters. It's what propels the plot. So, yeah, I mean, there's actually a lot of dialogue here. And Grace, I've kind of mentioned to you that I can imagine this being made into a stage play, a musical with Debbie Reynolds, for
A
example.
Hamilton, a Hamilton.
Exactly right. A 21st century hymn.
Well, let's proceed with the assassination.
Okay, so again, the first is the Aleph moment. I saw how every stone in the earth was formed and encrusted, stratified and impacted. I saw the desert and the ocean switching sides. I saw all the mothers and all the fathers in an angry primal scene. I saw the capillaries dilating of all the eyes made sore by the dust of the windswept earth. I saw 5 billion suns set and rise for 10 billion years on 20 trillion planets. I saw every wave that ever washed on every shore. I sat petrified now, like a sculpture in a bad place. And he to me, I told thee I would have to leave. Do not be unstable as you grieve. Promise me you will also sing the song of the bleeding throat, death's outlet song of life. For well, dear brother, I know if thou wast not granted to sing, thou wouldst surely die. Rest ye now. You have yet more traveling in the morning. I tried to say, I cannot leave you behind. I cannot let you die. But I couldn't move. The show commenced. Jack wailed, his face in his hands. I was breathing steadily, but I cannot prove it. And then I saw the gun, and the shade glanced at me as he took the last step on his hooves. The gun did not waver, and the shots rang out. Lincoln fell forward, off his chair. The man named Booth leapt over the railing, shouting, Sic semper tyrannis. Out of the air he fell and broke his leg. Oh, he sang out. Jack and I were not freed and held fast where we were, crying and now in pity and fear, while the crowd gathered and took him away. I cried until my body ached, and tears ran like salt canyons down my face, until when we were finally released, we collapsed in a pile in that place.
Who will guide Fing now? Who will guide Fing now that
I heard that. I just muted
Lincoln?
myself somehow.
Oh,
Um,
now
uh,
that Lincoln is gone.
Yeah, it's an unnerving moment for Fing, and in fact, it causes a big shift in the poem, where the first half, the first 1,850 lines of the poem are in first person. The second half falls into third person. So immediately leaving the scene, the poetry refers to Fing as he. So that's a big shift, right? The poet is changing from first person to third person, able to see from a different perspective. I'm not sure
And how does Gertrude Stein come in here?
Oh, that's right. Okay, so Fing starts out on his own, but the first person to come to guide him the rest of the way is Frederick Douglass. And Douglass basically he's a character who lived in New Bedford for real when he escaped from slavery. He first went to New York City and then ended up in New Bedford, Massachusetts. So there's a little historical connection there. And then as they're walking up Union Street, Gertrude Stein joins them as well. And Gertrude, I think of her as 19th and 20th century person. And so it's okay if she's kind of out of
It's
place.
really okay. With what
Yeah.
you've written, it's all okay because you have braided it together, I have to say, magnificently. But
Thank you.
I am totally obsessed with your process. And
Mhm.
so, how many days do you think you've spent writing this?
I got it done in a year. I was definitely driven. 3,600 lines in like 365 days,
This is
10,
just
10 lines a day.
limbo, just limbo.
Oh, just limbo. I would say it was probably about 3 or 4 months. Yeah. Uh,
What percentage of the day?
yeah, I usually like to get my stuff done in the morning. I'm pretty active in the morning. And so, now we're talking a long time ago, 25 years. How did I sit down and write this?
But
We
you're
had no
still
children.
going.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
but you had a wife, you have
Yeah,
children, you're
yeah,
teaching.
yeah,
And so I'm interested in knowing, talking about discipline, I'm talking about how it is to be a disciple to something
yeah,
you believe in. Talk about being a disciple to it.
yeah. Foucault is actually another good reference point for that. I mean, one of his books is called Discipline and Punish, and he basically refers to Western society as a disciplinary society, meaning each individual is brought into the society with conditioning, the conditioning of being in a family, the condition of having the church as part of your life, the condition of going to school. And all of these conditions add to the structure of your identity. So Foucault is important there. Is that a beginning of the answer?
That's a great answer. It's a great answer. And I
So the
mean,
idea, I'm sorry, the idea is that when I realize that all of this discipline is actually going on with people all the time, then I feel like I want to do what Foucault says, which is maximize my particular power in this equation so that I can be, the best person that I can be, the best writer. And so having a family helped me as a writer, being a writer helped me raise a family. All of these things are connected. And the discipline is just, get up and do it.
I have spent my life believing that the writer changes the word discipline from punishment because that's the way we usually think of it. Instead of
Yeah.
being really impassioned to follow our wish, our vision, our dream, this is surely started with a vision. And
Yeah.
that is what I love about it so much because it is really connecting to the invisible. And I want to know how you've addressed your assets. For example, the first book had incredible visuals. And
Okay.
now you've done 180 collages
Yeah.
and how many 61 songs,
Yeah.
like 4 albums.
Yes. Yeah.
And first of all, where do we hear the music?
Okay. Yeah. So the four albums are called Songs from Perdition, Limbo, and Elysium, Part One and Part Two, and these are at Bandcamp. Bandcamp is the musical website, and the name of the band is the Microcosmic Examples. I'll even put that in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Bandcamp. Oops, one word. And the microcosmic examples. And this was done during lockdown. And I always, as I said, I just I don't think people really want to read epic poetry, and I don't blame them. And so I just wanted to do more to draw people to the poetry. And so converting the poem into lyrics and putting it to music, something that I kind of always thought about, but just I could never have gotten it done in a year and a half unless there was a lockdown. I mean, it would have taken me 10 years to do.
Yeah. Listen, how do you change a poem into a lyric? I mean,
Mm.
how do you do that? They're very different.
Yeah, and I do feel very strongly that, rock lyrics are not
Well,
poetry.
did you well, look at Dylan. He got the
Yeah,
Nobel Prize.
yeah,
Well, how
yeah.
did you take a line of poetry and then abandon it and just rephrase it?
One of the things that is good about the terza rima, the tercets, is that I am trying to rhyme, and so some rhymes are showing up in the lyrics. But really, what I would do is I would take a scene, and the scene would have like 60 or 70 lines in it, and I would find the 24, 28, 16, 20 best lines, and I would separate those out and just make them work. Some tweaking, some changing of words, some moving lines around where needed. But for the most part, the poetry it comes over pretty straight.
Well, what is the third book?
The third book is called Elysium, and whereas Perdition was like black and white and red because it was hell, and Limbo is in New Bedford. Elysium is in the clouds. It's like a heavenly place, and it represents the time from 1776 to 1826, the first 50 years of the United States of America. Thanks, Alice.
And that is New Academia Publishing.
New Academia Publishing. Thank you very much to them, and thank you, Grace, for connecting me with them. They've been really helpful, and it's going to be great to have all three of the books out. To me, that's
What are some of the events that we can look forward to about this book? Are you going to have public performances? Are you going to give?
My big project now is to get a band together and perform the Profane Comedy songs with a band. That's really but I don't have a band.
Do you play an instrument?
I play guitar and harmonica, and I am socializing with musicians on a regular basis so that I can, get some people to get on stage with me and just, have a good time, because I wrote the music so that it would be fun.
Does the University of Maryland have a garage for a garage band?
Karen and I have
that's up to
touched on this.
Karen.
Yeah.
Well, we are waiting for the next book. We are admiring the present book, and it has been a literary pleasure to
Thank
speak
you,
to
Grace. Thank you very
Will.
much.
Loved every minute of it. I love authors. I love dreamers. I love visionaries, and I love it when they put it into practice.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Grace. So I guess my next thing is that I'm going to share with you a handful of the illustrations that I did for Limbo, and maybe just talk a little bit about first why I did that. With Perdition, I asked my friend Seth Goodkind, who is an illustrator, to do the illustrations for me, and I just, if you have any familiarity with the book, that's Abraham Lincoln, and Fing is like doesn't understand what's going on. So I really was I knew that illustration was a very important thing to get people to kind of, again, approach the poetry, but I couldn't afford to pay somebody else to do the illustrations for the next two books. So I even before I decided I would do collage for this book, I was into collage. I was doing collage because it was like a visual way of writing poetry. I was struggling with verbal poetry, and I decided I would try to just make art. So the collage work started before I actually applied it to this, but I understood it was coming. So this is what I ended up doing. And what I did was I went into some archives of New Bedford history, and I found 40 black and white pictures basically of the streets of New Bedford. And I had them blown up to 11 by 14. And then I decided to do collage on top of them. And that's basically what started, that's basically what I was trying to do, to illustrate it. And the idea was not to like do a one-to-one illustration, but just get some surreal stuff out there, spooky black and white, haunted sorts of imagery, and just kind of let that add another layer to the poetry itself. So Karen, should I be producing that web page that you and I have been working on for
Yeah, if
the
you could
image?
put it in the chat, then everybody, you can either put it in the chat and everybody can look at it, or you can share it on your
Share the
screen.
screen. All right.
Probably it's easier to share it on your
I
screen.
think so, but that means I have to pull that up. So I hope you all will bear with me for a second. That is one thing that I am not prepared for right now. That's not it either.
Alice already put the link to the book in the chat, so that's great. Thank you, Alice.
All right. So the cover of the book that I shared with you is from just before the assassination scene. And basically the image there is of Fing. I'm going to show it to you again. Are you all seeing this now? I'm sorry. There I am. I kind of got lost there. So birds are basically representing Fing and Jack. So if you see one or two birds, basically that means Fing, D. Selby Fing, the main character. And then you've got just a variety of other things going on. And here you've got a hexagon around the bird. And the idea there is that I'm using hexagons a great deal in Elysium in the next section. And so this is kind of just preparing the viewer for that structure later. Also, the compass is something that is repeatedly shown throughout the book. All right, so I'm going to show you the first image here, and this first image is of a place called Fort Phoenix. And you can kind of see the walls of the fort toward the back up at the top of the hill. Fort Phoenix was created during the Revolutionary War so that the people of New Bedford could keep a lookout for British ships that were approaching the harbor. And it was just kind of always a point that I returned to as a kid. New Bedford is where my family comes from. Both of my parents were born and grew up there. So I was born nearby and spent a lot of time in New Bedford. And I really think of it as kind of a quintessential American town. And so it's important that it is there. And it's important that the Revolutionary War history is a part of it. So the first thing that happens, thank you so much, Karen. Here, this is that picture of Fing alone on the street before the assassination. This street is Union Street. It's one of the central, commercial streets of the city, and you can see the boats in the harbor downhill at the piers, and then we're coming to the first illustration. And we're looking at Abraham Lincoln front and center. He's pretty young there. And we're meeting Abraham Lincoln and Fing are meeting Herman Melville. Yep. So that's Melville, also quite young. Again, images of a compass, the image of the lighthouse that also recurs throughout the poem, throughout the collage. And then this in the upper left is what is called uranographia, a paint or a mapping of the stars by a Dutchman by the name of Bode. You can roll that up, Karen, that's fine. Yeah, and so uranographia is for Johann Bode, a collection of 20 star maps. And I just thought this was really kind of a cool thing to recur also throughout the illustrations. We can keep rolling there. This is a second picture at the Fort Phoenix. We are now inside of those walls that we were looking up at before. These days, the cannons are actually on their on proper platforms, and it's not as much of a ruin. But it was a Revolutionary War place, so the idea of war is kind of part of American history. This particular image at the top has Yeah, you can't really see much right here, but these are amputated limbs. There's a lot of Civil War imagery in these collage pieces. To the left is an angel written or drawn by Gustave Doré, who also illustrated Dante's Divine Comedy, for example, and a number of other great literature pieces. So here's Lincoln, and he's on a Union soldier's body. And here's Melville, and he's on Robert E. Lee's body. And then we also have Scrimshaw in the corner. That's art on a whale's tooth, and Fing, pretty much the baby bird, square in the middle. Yeah, and so the egg also is representative of Jack, and we'll see Jack. We'll see two birds going forward, I believe. That's good. Thanks, Karen. So this is the third image. We have another uranographia up here. We have this mystery character. We have an enslaved person. This is looking at the New Bedford Harbor from Fairhaven, which is a town just across the water. You know, it's kind of a romantic view, but the idea is that there's a lot going on in America, even when there's kind of this romance vision. And one of the things that you will see throughout are pictures of slaves, enslaved people. And it's just kind of a reminder that this is part of American history. You also have a soldier here pictured with his wife, and then you have two birds. So we have these two birds. That's one is Jack and one is Fing, and I never decided which was which. This is also at the piers. We have Stephen Douglas, we have Millard Fillmore, we have Lincoln, and we have the two birds. And you just get kind of a sense of like this huge anchor back here and all these barrels. It was a very busy commercial place. And there's Millard Fillmore was actually his head was on a tuna. That's the absurdity. That's the weirdness. At this point in the poem, Fing and Lincoln and Jack are leaving the docks, and they're joining a group of men to go drinking at a bar. And so this particular picture just shows a number of men who, you know, in this case is soldiers. In this case, I presume those are soldiers as well, or at least scouts. And the idea is that, you know, the men are leaving the docks and they're going to the bar. There's Lincoln with actually we can pull this up because we got a closer picture there. This emancipation image of Lincoln. Also something I kind of take issue with, and I think I'm not the only one. You have depictions of, you know, the emancipation of the slaves, but you don't see anything like equality between the two people. So Lincoln is always kind of above the freed slave, and the freed slave is always pretty much in a position of worship, which, you know, that's not so popular anymore, I think. And I think that's the last image. Yeah. Here you can actually buy the book at New Academia Publishing. If you go to their website and click on poetry and view all, you can scroll down and it's among the new releases. And if you wanted, you could scroll further and find Perdition, because both books have been published there. And I think it's time for some questions, if we're going to have any.
I put the link to that presentation in the chat if people want to spend more time with it. And
thank you very much. So the other thing, Alice has put the Microcosmic Examples website there. One of the ways that I approach the music for each section, for Perdition, I figured this is a depiction of hell, so I'm going to make music that only has two chords in it, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And that's good if you don't know how to play an instrument very well. ended up doing 18 songs. And then the second section, Limbo, is 3-chord songs. So I can start doing some blues structures, and you'll hear that a little bit in those songs. And then with Elysium, they were 4-chord songs and much more music going on, I guess is what I would say. So please listen to the music. That's to me, that seems to me the best way for people to kind of dig in, if you're not willing to read it. All right, any questions? Don't be shy. I see a hand up. Is there a hand up? No, oh, that's me. Well, okay. I don't. Tyler, you ready? Thank you, but you're muted. There we go.
Can you hear me?
I can. Thank you.
Yeah. So one of the things I've been impressed by is not only did you write this epic poem based on Dante in 3 parts, but that you've been doing, like, you've been continuously adding to this enterprise over the 25 years since you completed it, with the, you know, the incredible collages and the videos and music. And so I think that's an interesting artist journey. And I'm just kind of curious, like, if you would comment on the idea that you have been spending, like, this is a life project that you've been working on, and you developed all these fictional personalities for the authors and wrote a lot about that. So I guess I'm just curious about that. Like, I'd love to hear you talk about what it's been like to spend your time fleshing out this work where the source of it was composed 25 years earlier.
Yeah, I kind of think about those guys who go out into the desert and make monumental art, you know, out of stone, and you know, it takes them 50 years to do it, and you know, people can barely understand it. I mean, that's kind of it. I'm just out in the desert trying making this stone thing that hopefully people will show up to look at. But for me, the journey has been fabulous. I mean, if you had told me 25 years ago that I would be making collage for the poetry, I wouldn't necessarily have believed it. I certainly didn't have the confidence to do that kind of image work. You know, you've been with me these 25 years. I didn't necessarily act like I was going to be, you know, a visual artist 25 years ago. So, you know, coming up on that was kind of amazing, but also it was partly because, I think I said it before, I wasn't really writing as much, and I wasn't really happy with the poetry that I was doing. And so when I realized that collage is the same kind of compression of imagery, it made sense that I could do that for the poetry. And, you know, the music was, I think, a little bit more natural fit for me. I remember reading a biography of Bob Dylan, and it was talking about his talking blues. And he didn't do a lot of them, but early on in his career, he did the talking blues. And I thought, geez, I mean, if you can do talking blues, I mean, all you got to do is have something to say. And at the time, I thought, well, I have a 100-page poem. So it took me a number of years to figure out exactly how the music was going to fit in with the words. But also, that was just fabulous. I mean, who doesn't want to you know, try a new thing and have it work with the old thing? So yeah, I don't know if there's any one final word on it. I did recently tell some folks that I'm not sure what else I can do, but then the other side of it is I want to make a Broadway show out of it. So I'm, you know, I want to get a Tony and a Grammy and an Emmy. So,
As you should, as you should.
I'm an ambitious person.
Thank
Grace,
you.
yes.
I'm interested in your practice. I know you have a daily spiritual practice, and
Try
I
to.
wonder how that does sustain your creativity.
Yeah, especially with the music, I think it's pretty important. One of the things that collage has really helped me in terms of meditative practice is, just getting away from, William Pittman and just be consciousness, right? And just try to channel things without the filter of what I like or don't like or anything like that. So I listen to a lot of, I don't know what to call it. I mean, oud music, O-U-D, like it's a Middle Eastern kind of guitar with a deep kind of belly in it. So it has a really spacious sound. So a lot of, I think the music that I'm working on these days is conveying the space that my meditative practice kind of allows me to touch on.
That is really interesting.
So I
And
released an album recently by the Microcosmic Examples called "The Material of the Spirit," and the idea is, to kind of make manifest that space and that emptiness that's actually out there.
how has this book fed into your understanding of your own journey?
Yeah, I think we've kind of touched on that before. I was not a Buddhist when I wrote this book. I was an angry young man, and I think that what following the journey of anger and trying to release the anger and trying to accept my life without that baggage prepared me for when I did eventually come to Buddhist ideas, surrender and detachment and that sort of stuff. So what I would say is that writing that poem was a way to kind of separate myself from William Pittman.
I see another book.
Hmm.
There's
I
a
don't
memoir.
know. I don't know. I see a
What is
Broadway show.
okay, you just create that in your mind, and as you did everything else.
Make it manifest. I don't know how it's going to happen.
Well, we're all on your team.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that everybody's here, and no questions are fine. This is lovely as is. So, Karen, that's good for me. If we want to finalize here.
Somebody
Here's
has a question in the chat.
Okay. Would you use your existing music for a musical show or create new musical specially designed? So one of the things that I will tell the people who I recruit to be in my band is these songs are demos. They are, the basic ideas. And if I bring musicians in, then they can do what they want with, the parts of the songs, but ultimately they'll be the same song. So new arrangements, Betsy, but not necessarily new songs.
I have a question.
Thanks, Alice.
So you talked a little bit about separating William Pittman from the author, so can you talk a little bit more about that and why you use pseudonyms?
Yeah, I think the pseudonyms were part of that, right? I guess basically when I was 35 years old, I think I became a truly mature person. Alice, I guess you can speak to that from your perspective as well. But and so what was happening at that point was I realized that I was kind of just getting lost in ego stuff. I wouldn't say that that's what I was thinking at the time, but now I can look at it that way. And that my writing was not getting better as a result of it. I also went back to get my graduate degree and I started to read stuff and analyze it in ways that I never had before. So the idea of creating the pseudonym was basically like, okay, we can fictionalize my life's journey, and then it can be a journey for every man. I mean, it's everybody's journey, and that's one of the reasons that Dante's work is so important. Is that basically, if you follow Dante from the beginning to the end, you are going to know how to attain your salvation. And I think that was, that's partly why I wanted to get William Pittman out of there. It's not easy. William Pittman is a stubborn person. Oh, Larry. All right. I don't want to force anybody to ask any questions. I'm really pleased with this experience, and I'm going to keep going. So I'll continue to bother you all and tell you what's coming up. And when I tell you that the band is performing, you'll know that I've hit my next goal.
And the
Thank you
musical,
all.
when you make your debut on Broadway, let us know. We'll watch
Yeah.
that too.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It'll be in the papers, I'm sure.
I'm sure. Yeah. So, yeah. This is fantastic. As Caroline says, congratulations. It's great to be able to celebrate another book. And so we look forward to the third book. No pressure.
Oh yeah, we'll do this again next year. Okay.
Yeah, great, fantastic. Same place. Yeah.
Thank you all. And
Yeah.
I guess there'll be a recording of this. So
There will be we have to get it edited, and our graduate student is learning, so it has another one to do, and it'll take a little while, but it'll eventually be joining the first one on YouTube at the department's channel. So so I'll try and remember to send to everybody to see.
And you've all seen it anyway, so
We've all seen it. Yep. So thank you.
okay.
Thank you for
Thank
being
you
here,
again.
everybody. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Nice
Take care.
Congrats.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.